Intel's top 5 CPUs of 2020. I can't do it. I simply can't do it. I can give you the 5 Intel CPUs that interested me most in 2020. I can do that. It's a bit of a fight, but I can do it. Number 5 on my list is a processor I reviewed, which was the Core i5-10600K. It's a perfectly decent processor, still uses 14nm, 6 cores, 12 threads. The headline of the review said, it's a Core i7-8700K. And this is my problem with this £250 desktop processor, which is that it's perfectly decent, and it really annoys me because I don't see any reason why Intel couldn't have released the i5-10600K a few years ago. It's an i7-8700K that runs perfectly fast, reasonably cool. It has a crazy 125 watt TDP, which doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, and we can ignore that kind of TDP in this day and age. This is an allegedly new processor that isn't really new at all, on a new socket LJ1200, which means you require a Z490 or whatever motherboard, and therefore the expense is way more than the price of the processor. Having said all that, AMD, with their bizarre pricing and their horrendous availability because they're just selling everything, they've kind of left some space for Intel. So the i5-10, if I was to receive a gaming PC as a Christmas present from someone, and it had an i5-10600K in it and a decent graphics card, I'd be perfectly happy because that system would play well. But this annoys me. This is the dog end of 14nm. This is a part Intel could have clearly released previously, or if you want to take the i7-8700K view, they did release previously, and therefore what the heck. So I've reviewed this part, we've got benchmarks galore, it performs perfectly okay, and it still annoys me. Next up, a processor I kind of saw briefly but didn't get around to doing a video of, Intel Lakefield, or to give it its full name, Core i5 L16G7, or Lakefield. So I have the Lego kit that came with the set of stuff I was sent by Intel, which demonstrates how Lakefield works. So it's a packaged doofer. We have that, and some memory on top. And then we lean on it, and lo and behold, a system on chip that's more than a regular system on chip. Intel's first hybrid processor. It has 1 Sunny Cove core, i.e. a proper core, and 4 Tremont cores, i.e. 4 Atom cores. It's following that big little approach that Qualcomm's been using with their various Snapdragons. What Intel did was to send out 2 Galaxy Book S laptops, thin and light, 11mm in thick or thinness. 13.3 inch on the diagonal, full HD touchscreen laptops with monumental battery life, like 25 hours of video playback or some such. The one laptop was powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 8CX, the other by the Intel Lakefield. And Intel's point was to demonstrate that their laptop running Windows, because its x86 would run Windows applications natively. For example, you could use the Galaxy Book S to run Photoshop or Cinebench, and this was quite correct, you could. Whereas with the ARM version, nah, not so much. Cinebench, forget it. Photoshop, probably forget it. On the other hand, a browser, you go from Facebook and watch videos and such like it, do all that stuff like an absolute dream. No problem whatsoever. So Intel made the point that their first hybrid processor would do all the Windows stuff, albeit slowly. It had great battery life. It was very thin and light, and therefore great success. The 2 Achilles heels in the plural of Lakefield in this iteration. The one is that the Sunny Cove core had a clock speed of 1.4 gigahertz, where the various Snapdragon processors are running along at like 3 gigahertz. So they might be tiddly, but you get 8 of them, and they're running at 3 gigahertz. So sure, they can't do x86 Windows stuff properly natively, and Intel can, but 1.4 gigahertz on a single core, that's gotta hurt. And then you add in the Tremont Atom cores to give it a bit more go, and that's all interesting and fine, but nonetheless, those clock speeds, not impressive. The other problem, the price. I've just checked today, and right now you can go out and you can buy the Galaxy Book S with ARM, discounted £849 for Christmas. You can buy the Lakefield version for £999. Truth be told, both of those are expensive, but £999 is more than £849. A lot more than £849. And that says to me that while Lakefield is interesting, and it's obviously a forerunner of what's coming on the desktop in the future with hybrid processors, blimey, that's expensive. So yes, it works. Third on my list of most interesting processors from Intel is the Core i9-10900K. I reviewed this processor, I liked it a lot. Obviously Intel's been swamped by AMD in 2020, but the fact is that 10 cores and 20 threads running at 4.9 GHz on all cores with reasonable power, actually quite high power draw, but reasonable temperatures is an impressive thing to behold. Still 14 nanometer. Turbo 5.3 GHz, depending on thermals, but we saw 5.3 GHz consistently, and this is still on 14 nanometer. There is no doubt that AMD's 16 cores running at a decent clock speed will beat Intel 10 cores running at a high clock speed. That's a fact if you're doing, say, video editing. But in gameplay, you don't need 16 cores, you don't need 12 cores, you need a decent number of cores running at a decent clock speed. In gaming, Intel still has a dog in the fight, no two ways about it, and the i9-10900K is good. The thermals. Intel tells us that they've thinned the silicon die by 0.3mm, they've thickened the copper heat spreader by the same 0.3mm, so you can carry across your cooler from previous builds to the new build. That's absolutely fine. Shame they didn't do it last time round, because when all said and done, the 9th gen was hot and toasty. If they'd had this bright idea previously and put it into action, that would have been welcome. Pricing of that part at the moment, £540. Intel suffered with supply and availability of this part in the first instance, but you can now buy it. But £540 strikes me as fairly expensive. I will return to this, however. So that's the middle of my stack. That's the third on my list of 5 parts, is the Core i9-10900K. Second on my list is Tiger Lake, 11th gen mobile, 10 nanometer. Forget Ice Lake. Ice Lake was a nightmare. Tiger Lake, on the other hand, looks like the real deal. Intel sent us an MSI laptop for a preview. We're allowed to benchmark it. We couldn't look at battery life. There were various reasons given. My guess is that the processor was sucking an awful lot of power and the battery life was going to be hammered as a result. But I didn't benchmark it because I was told not to, and I stuck to that agreement. But the processor is good. You've got quad core running at proper clock speeds, and that's impressive to see. So in straightforward grunt work, it does a reasonable job. Still gets beaten, however, by Ryzen mobile with 8 cores. No argument there. The Xe graphics also look good. There's no doubt in my mind that many thinner light laptops in 2021 are going to pack NVIDIA MX 350 and then MX 450 graphics, because that's the way the world works. It's a shame. The Xe graphics are decent, or at least the full-fat G7 with 96 execution units. They do a good job. Intel has promised us AI features and other clever instruction sets, support for AVX 512, things like that we haven't previously had. How well those features help performance and deliver new features remains to be seen at the moment, because they're obviously software dependent. But the straightforward Tiger Lake and the Xe graphics, it works, no two ways about it. Top of my list is a processor I have not seen. This is the Core i9-10850K. It's a 10900K minus 100 megahertz and £110 cheaper. When you're talking the difference between 4.9 gigahertz all core and 4.8 gigahertz all core, the percentage difference is utterly trivial. Maybe it's true to say the 10850K leaves a slightly sour taste in the mouth, because it feels like perhaps the 10900K was a reviewer special that had been binned to the inch of its life, and then when Intel had to actually supply parts, they found they couldn't. It's possible. I think it's more likely they launched the 10900K at, as I say, at the moment, £540 is the current selling price. And then when AMD updated with Zen 3, Intel looked and saw this gaping 400 and something pound hole where Ryzen 7 8 core should be absolutely crushing. And they thought, we'll have that. And here we have this. It's not a price cut, it's a different part model. because obviously it's the same part, it's just binned slightly differently. And that's the result. If you're looking for a gaming PC, you should seriously consider the Core i9 10850K, because I know what the 10900K does. This is the same blooming thing, but a hell of a sight cheaper. But it does mean you need to buy into Z490, and it does mean you're stuck with PCI Express Gen 3 rather than Gen 4, which obviously might be upsetting to you. But it's certainly interesting, and that fulfills my brief. I'm not sure which day of the Christmas and New Year period this video is going to go out, but have a lovely one, whichever holiday it is, and we'll catch you in the new year.